Consistency oftentimes beats intensity. Consistency oftentimes beats intensity. There's a story I was listening to the other day by a guy called Jim Collins, one of my favorite authors. And he makes a point that when it comes to the pursuit of achieving massive success and what separates mediocre companies from great companies is that the great companies have a dedication to consistency. And he even has a quote there where he says that the mark of mediocrity is chronic inconsistency. That quote struck me a lot because he argues the point that talent is oftentimes outpaced by consistency. There's a story that he shares about what he calls the 20-mile march. And in the story, which I'll share with you, there's this competition that was happening where two camps had to march across or to hike across the country of the United States. And he makes the point that the two camps had two different approaches and strategies to achieving the goal. So the one camp, they had what they call a 20-mile march. So what they did was that they calculated how long the distance was, and that if they could just march 20 miles every day, they would be able to cross the distance and hopefully win the race. Whereas there was another camp that had an intensity approach. Their approach was that we will push as hard, as fast, and as much as we can every single day so that we can hopefully beat this race. At the end of the race, those who had the 20-mile march, they not only won the race, but they won the race still intact and every one of their men was still alive. Whereas the guys that had the intensity approach, they didn't all finish it, and they first of all lost the race, and after losing it, some of the men didn't make it across the finish line. And when he describes the difference between the 20-mile march and the intensity approach, that the 20-mile march focused on the power of consistency. So their approach is that whether it's raining, whether it's sunshine, whether it's snowing, whether it's windy, every day they're going to march 20 miles a day so that they can cover their distance. Whether they feel like it or not, whatever the circumstances may be, whatever the circumstances may look like, every day they would march 20 miles and they'd hopefully beat the trek or the race, which they eventually did. Whereas the other guys, on the first day, they pushed hard, so they went like 40 miles. The next day, they probably pushed another, 50 kilometers or 50 miles. And then on the next day, after such a huge push, their men were exhausted and they wanted to take a break, especially because the circumstances weren't permitting. It was very, very hot. In some instances, it was snowing a lot. So they looked at the adverse circumstance around them and they regulated their intensity by how good or how difficult the circumstances were around them. The other guys, they were disciplined that whatever happens, 20 miles a day they would march. And the ultimate result of that is that they eventually won the race, and they won it by a mile. They won it by a huge gap. And there it teaches the power of what's called, or what one could call consistency, the power of daily, consistent action that are tied towards the accomplishment of a specific end goal in mind. When it comes to the both, I often find myself relying more on an intensity approach because it's an approach which allows a person to rely more on their talent, on their abilities, on their skills, and on their knowledge. And if someone is just good enough at what they do, their talent could get them across, They're just hard and intense in their talent or doing their best, and then hopefully that'll get them across, But there's a text that I love that says, it's in Ecclesiastes 9:11, I believe. It says, "The race is not to the swift, nor is the battle to the mighty, nor is bread to the wise, but time and chance happens to them all." And the idea there is that the one who wins the race isn't the most talented, or the one who wins isn't the most gifted or the most skilled, but it's the one who makes the best use of time and chance, I made a quote the other day about luck or chance, and that luck is a product of preparation plus opportunity. And the idea is the same, is that time and chance happens to the one who is consistent, who makes daily use of the time necessary to accomplish the specific end goal that they have in mind. I'm sure you may know the story of the tortoise and the hare, and in this instance, I relate more to the tortoise. I mean, to the rabbit, the hare. In the story of the tortoise and the hare, the tortoise is slow, but he is consistent. Whereas the rabbit, he's fast, he's talented, he's strong, but he's not always that consistent. He's not disciplined, So he'll run, he'll take a nap here, he'll sleep there, because he relies so much on his talent. He knows that his talent has set him apart from the others so much and so often that he relies on it without necessarily having to cultivate the power of discipline or consistency. But the reality is that when it comes to achieving the major goals we have in life, very often consistency beats intensity. So you might have two people, the one might be talented and the one might be, less talented, but they have discipline and consistency. Whereas the one who is talented might be able to do, whatever is required of him, might have talent. The one who is consistent, who puts in more daily time, who puts in more effort, who makes sure that they do what they need to do every day at a certain time, all the time. The one who is consistent has a better chance at actually accomplishing and achieving what they set out to do, more than the one who's merely intense or who's merely talented. Similar to the story of the tortoise and the rabbit. In that instance, you would think that the rabbit would win the race because he's so fast, but talent couldn't outpace consistency. That in the long game, when it comes to long-term accomplishment and long-term aims and goals, very often consistency beats intensity. That the consistent daily action, what this looks like, can be related to any specific goal you have in mind. So if you want to write a book, for example, I can tell you that if you're writing consistently every day and you set a goal to say, look, I will write for 30 minutes a day, or I will write 2 pages a day, eventually after a period of time, those 2 pages eventually accumulate to becoming a book. Or whether it's, I will practice every day, when you're going to run a marathon or run a comrades or run a long distance track, practicing to say, okay, I will up my time by 1 kilometer every week, or 1 kilometer every month, or 10 kilometers every whatever. That consistent daily input strengthens and eventually arrives at the end goal. I will admit that I am not always one of the most consistent, and it's a muscle that I think we can train. And one approach to that is to set at least one area of life where a person can be consistent, to say, okay, I will wake up at a certain time every day, or I will spend 30 minutes every day doing this, or I will, I'll make sure that, this thing called micro habits, I'll do one small thing every day consistently, whether it's making your bed, whether it's, doing something at a certain time. For me, I set a goal to record at least 1 video a day, or to post at least 1 video a day every day for 90 days. A very audacious goal, but it's to cultivate the muscle of consistency. And the idea is that how you do one thing becomes how you do everything, right? That if you learn how to be consistent in one area of life, you can strengthen the muscle to be able to be consistent in every other area of life, bit by bit as you grow. And to be honest, in as much as consistency beats intensity or talent, when consistency meets talent, when a person who's talented then becomes consistent, they can become Superman. They become a Kobe Bryant or a Usain Bolt or a LeBron James or a Lionel Messi or a Cristiano Ronaldo. It's because talent meets daily consistent action and improvement. And that's what separates, those who are merely talented from those who eventually actually finish. There's a text I love, I just can't remember the reference. I'll post it in the screen. That says finishing is better than starting. Finishing is better than starting. And, talent can often get things started. I want to start this because you're good at it. But consistency is actually what enables finishing. So whereas talent can get you started, get you going, consistency is actually what results in things getting finished. Whether it's consistent daily study, consistent daily exercise, consistent daily, reading or writing or taking a specific action every day or every week, consistency often results in intensity or in success more than intensity. In line with that quote by Jim Collins, where he says that the mark of mediocrity is chronic inconsistency. And the opposite of that is true, that the mark of true excellence is consistency, it's chronic consistency. And if you and I can just master that habit, can make for positive results in many other areas of life. That even if you aren't the most talented, if you are the most consistent, you can outpace the one who is more talented in the very long run. I hope that that's valuable to you and that we can all empower our muscle of consistency and become the best versions of ourselves and what God created us to be.